Well, an iron curtain has descended around the Crimea. If anybody thinks things are going to change now that Crimea is part of Russia, despite it even being mainly ethnic Russians by colonization, it's not going to change. It's going to be the same corruption, business as usual. The apparatus that's in control may be coming more from Moscow rather than coming from a puppet of Putin from Ukraine. And, it's amazing that people think that there was, well, maybe there was somewhat of a Western backing of, to push that government out. But the thing is, that government that was in control before, but that was the Putin's puppet, was corrupt to the extreme because of the opulence of the president that was there. It was pretty obvious, his extreme wealth in a poor country. I mean, his residence looked like the Palace of Versailles in France. He looked like King Louis XIV at the time he was deposed of his throne. That's how powerful and wealthy this guy was. The joke was when they saw his opulence, when the president was ousted the dictator, whatever you want to call him, was ousted in Ukraine. It says the Ukraine would have been wealthy if the Ukraine was run. The country itself was run the same way he ran his personal finances. And he had a zoo on his own property. He had his lake with a yacht, an antique type yacht fitted like from the 1800s. He had dozens and dozens and dozens of high value antique cars and motorcycles. Besides all the opulent settings in his home. The guy was an oligarch in his own right. And, if the Crimeans, even the Russian Crimeans, think things are going to change now, they're not. It's going to be the same old deal. Because actually part of the problem that was going on in the Ukraine where they're getting screwed over was from Vladimir Putin's puppet, who got ousted. They never gave a chance to the new government. And, of course, Vladimir Putin moved in with tanks, which he says are not his Russian. They're unmarked and all this type of stuff. Quite a joke, actually, because... where'd these troops come from? They weren't just these, first off, if they were just troops in the Crimea that he was allowed to have there, how come there was no insignia? How come there was no insignia? Weren't they supposed to, that's another ludicrous statement you hear from some of the people out there in YouTube land, well, they were allowed to have troops out there. Well, they weren't allowed to freaking have troops patrolling all over the street in Crimea and setting up roadblocks. I'm disappointed in some of our so-called veterans. They're a joke. And any communist propaganda is out there. It seems like Americans seem to bite right away. And I'm going to state this. Vladimir Putin is a communist. He's actually right from the hardcore inner circle, the KGB circle, right from the get-go. He's not a Christian. That's an act. His father was a staunch atheist. I put out about him being part of Vlasov's army, General Vlasov, the turncoat traitor to Russia, that sided with the Nazis and also participated in the crushing of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And, people are pointing out, well, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising by Jews, it never happened. That's what they'll say. They'll say it never happened. Of course, these are the same people that say a lot of things never happened, too. This is the kind of stuff you get on the internet. It's like talk about revision of history. That's a little ridiculous. There might be some controversy as to the exact number of Jews that were killed in World War II, but, there's some people that seem to always want to revise it downward till it's practically zero. There's other stuff like that. There's other games going on. But Vladimir Putin's father, it's a fact, he was a staunch atheist. Vladimir Putin himself joining the KGB, the biggest threat to the Russian state was Christianity. Christianity actually supersedes the state. God supersedes the state. They never liked that at all. They suppressed Christianity. Now, what you got today is like, it's coming out. Oh, yeah, but, it's a game. It's a game to keep the people in control. Vladimir Putin, being a member of the KGB and somebody who was actually more ruthless and more materialistic than average, is not somebody that's a staunch Christian. It's all an act. It's all a dog and pony show for the freaking masses. And it's unfortunate that Westerners get behind that left and right. They have no clue. They have no clue at all. They're naive as all hell. And actually, if you look back at the time from the 70s, and former KGB Major Anatoly Golitsyn, who defected in 1961, has stated back in the 70s that all the dissolution of the Soviet Union and everything was a ruse. It was going to come about. He predicted correctly. Now they're beginning to show their true colors. Now, I think Vladimir Putin may not do too much right now, but it'll be a waiting game till the next opportunity comes up. There may be some problem in Poland. Actually, there was a portion of Poland that, it was Prussia, actually. It wasn't really, it's part of Poland now. But it was a German-speaking or German enclave that was landlocked from Germany. And this is one of the reasons that Hitler invaded Poland, because they had German-speaking people. Actually, it wasn't even part of Poland, it was Prussia. But he wanted to have it so it wasn't landlocked. You'd have to reach it by sea. You didn't have to go through Poland. He says there was German-speaking people in Poland that were being suppressed by the Poles. That was Hitler's excuse. Sounds just like Vladimir Putin. Now, that whole area that used to be German-speaking, what happened after World War II? They exported them on open boxcar trains. Many of them froze to death. German citizens. Old, young, babies, don't matter, women, children, doesn't matter. Without food, a lot of them froze to death in open boxcars. They manually exported them out and they colonized it with Russians. That's why that's a Russian enclave today. But it's actually part of Poland proper. So, history repeats itself with the new Hitler, Vladimir Putin. He'll do the same damn thing sometime in the future. But right now, obviously, Poland is in NATO. So that's one of the problems. He won't do that right away. But he will do things as much as possible piecemeal. He'll wait for things to die down, and his game is to restore the old Soviet Union. It's unfortunate that there's a lot of people in the West that can't see this game. But anybody, if you think... I'm going to state this. This is where people are seeing something up with Putin, where he's against the West and he's against the New World Order. He is against the Western New World Order. The West is hopefully the New World Order elitists in the West that are looking to install a one world government are trying to work with or trying to manage Russia to put it all together into one world government. This plan has been going on for decades. There's one problem with this deal, though, is that Putin wants it. There's people in Russia that want it on their terms. They don't want it on Western terms. So, like anybody that's actually for freedom and that's against one world dictatorship, actually has two enemies. It's not like, and actually our system in the United States of limited government, checks and balances, which we can really get back to where we were originally, has far more tools than anything that's in Russia right now. If we throw out this system, we're going to be screwed royally because of, it's like, if people think that's bad now, wait till if it gets more like Russia. That's why people are glorifying this dictator, have no clue what the hell they're doing. No clue. He's been in power since 2000, one way or the other. When he was elected in 2012, that's for a 6-year term, so he's going to be in power for 18 years. And it's my contention he's never going to go out of power because the next guy he can't trust. The next guy, to make himself look good, will bring out everything that's true on Putin and probably slam him to the wall. So he's never going to give up power. He's never going to give up power. And just as the alternative media accuses the West of going to war to divert domestic attention away from problems at home, Vladimir Putin is going to do the same damn thing. This guy's a dangerous guy to the max. But people in Crimea, even if they're ethnic Russians, are going to find out the situation's not going to change. They've even had, and actually, they say the problems were coming from Ukraine government, but the Ukraine government that was causing the problem for the Crimea was controlled by Vladimir Putin. So now you got direct control by Vladimir Putin. So that's what's going on with the ethnic Russians, which does not, I know the ethnic Russians are basically colonists. They haven't been there that many generations. The ethnic people, the Tatars and the ethnic Ukrainians that were in Crimea are the minority. Putin says they're not going to be suppressed. But look what happened to the protesters after Putin's election. What did he do? He corralled them up and he had the police, cordon them off and get them into a small area, and he beat a lot of them to a pulp with batons and arrested them and stuff like that. That's what he did. That's not freedom. That was against the Constitution of Russia even, not alone the Constitution of the United States. Now, if Russia today, of course they wanted to make it sound like all those people were financed by the West, the protesters. Anybody that's against Vladimir Putin, according to the Kremlin voice of Russia Today propaganda outlet in America, anybody that's against Vladimir Putin is somebody financed by the West. I'm not financed by the West. Get the hell out of here. Somebody's going to think I'm freaking financed by somebody in the West here by this. No way. This is what I'm telling you, the flat out common sense facts. This guy is actually, if people think Obama's a dictator or Bush is a dictator, yeah, they are moving towards a one world government and all that type of stuff. And Vladimir Putin doesn't want to be second fiddle in a one world government. He wants to be the top dog. He wants it on his terms. So to run to Vladimir Putin as a solution is idiotic. And actually, when people in Russia, I don't even know how this deal will work, because, first off, if you had 95% or 94% of the vote, why would you need a whole bunch of tanks and troops without insignia? Now, in other words, if they were the Russians that were stationed in Crimea and they actually illegally went into the Crimea itself, Putin denies they're Russians, says they're self-defense forces. That was ludicrous as all hell in itself. But say, for instance, if the election is going to be that lopsided, why do you need a whole bunch of tanks all over the place? Do you think there's going to be Americans just paying somebody off or buying a vote somehow? Do you really think that? Are you that ludicrous? Is anybody that ludicrous to think that? I mean, you think that somebody's got that kind of power to do that type of stuff? No, they don't. That's ridiculous. Because if they had that kind of power, they could have freaking thrown the vote in Russia, for instance, right there. And actually, the guy that was in power already, that Yanukovych, whatever his name is, he would have been ousted along. He would have never got elected in the first place. So, he actually, that show of force was to intimidate people to vote a certain way, because, like I said, the choices were, be independent, which means you would have got flattened by those tanks if you were independent, or join us with the tanks. And, there could have been a choice to go into Ukraine, keep it the same, or maybe even a fourth choice to go into the Ukraine as long as the Ukraine doesn't join the EU. I don't like the EU myself, but I'm not Ukrainian. But, that referendum was no choice for anybody. But, what's interesting is the Russians themselves that voted for it and think it's a good idea, there's not going to be any change. There's not going to be any change. Actually, there's probably going to be more totalitarian control than before. If they thought things were rigged and screwed up before in the government because it was coming from Kiev, that because of what was going on actually from a puppet installed by Putin, now you're going to find out what it's like from Putin directly. He's the law. There is no freaking constitution in Russia. Putin is the law, period. And he's going to play all these games, and anytime something happens wrong, it's going to be the West did it. Oh, the West did it. Oh, the West did it, according to Russia Today. And just remember what that other yo-yo said on, I forgot what the hell it was, but he's handpicked by Putin to basically speak for himself from the Kremlin. You talk about warmongers. These guys are talking about, remember, Russia could turn the United States into radioactive dust, is what he just said last week. These guys are never going to give up power. Never. Putin's elected to 2018. By the end of his election, we're going to be at war with Russia. Or very, very close to it. Very close to it, and there's going to be some hot conflicts going on. I'll guarantee it. And I don't know, hopefully there's not any veterans in the United States that are going to be siding with this shit and going against the administration over here, because if that's the case, they need to have their benefits taken away. I mean, if you're all for the Putin regime way of doing things, well, guess what? I don't see what then you shouldn't have to worry about freedom of speech then either, because you don't have freedom of speech in Russia, despite what they say. Because look what happened to the protesters, after Putin's election. And they say that Crimea was taken without firing a shot. That's bullshit too. You know why? Because there's at least one instance of a Ukrainian soldier who was doing, because I think the Ukrainian soldiers were under orders not to do anything. He was just walking his post. He was shot in the head and shot in the heart and killed dead. And by a Russian. So there's been a lot of stuff going on. And, a lot of people want to say that it's always the West doing something. No, it's not. The West doesn't have that kind of power. If it had that kind of power, that president, that was the corrupt president in there in the first place, that was handpicked by Putin to be the puppet, he wouldn't have been in there in the first place anyway. So, we got, actually, I'm just going to say, to sum it up, if you're really somebody who's in the alternative, you're for the Constitution, you're for a limited form of government, you're against totalitarianism. There's a problem with people in the United States that are totalitarians, that are wrecking our Constitution, and Vladimir Putin is another extreme totalitarian guy that's going to actually screw you up big time. It's his act with the Christianity is simply that, an act. He's from the KGB. His father was a staunch atheist. He plays an act with that Christianity stuff. It's all for the masses, for consumption for the masses. He's no different from Stalin, but they're playing a new game. And if you look very carefully at what Major Anatoly Golitsyn said, that's exactly how it was going to be played out. They're going to actually introduce more communist. They're going to be the same communists, but it's basically with a human face, same kind of control. And this way, to get more infusion of Western technology by befriending the West. That's one reason I watch who the hell I get buddy with, because I'm always cautious about that kind of shit. Oh, big time. Anyway, but that's the game that they're playing. They're looking to get to be. They dissolved the Soviet Union as a long-range strategic deception to befriend the West. As a matter of fact, when Gorbachev was still president of Russia, he was given the keys to Presidio, which was a old naval facility off the hills of San Francisco. That dates back to the 1700s, whereby it was to help him start his Gorbachev USA Foundation, which basically is a communist environmental takeover type organization. Along with, I don't want to get into it, Nancy Pelosi was involved in this shit, all kinds of crap. They're all working together. The only problem is, you see where it is you're seeing like Putin is working against the West, and the West is getting pissed off, is that Putin wants control on his terms. He's not going to help anybody out in the West. That Christianity stuff he's playing, it's a game. It's a game and a half. It's all for freaking the consumption of the masses to keep them in line. I'm not saying that Christianity's wrong. I'm not saying that at all, if you're freaking missing the point there. I'm saying that Vladimir Putin is not a Christian. The guy was KGB and a staunch atheist all his life, and his father was. All of a sudden he becomes a Christian? Tell me another one, man. Tell me another one. You know what it's for. And, considering how he is, it's a smooth act. Considering how he is with, how he came to power in the first place, which was the apartment building bombing with the Chechen rebels. That was all staged by the FSB and him, so he can wage war on them. Everybody's saying the West does everything. No, Russia does a lot of stuff too. So, I hope people don't keep glorifying this guy in the West like a bunch of idiots. I do have issue with Obama is projecting weakness in some ways. Yeah, I know he is. That's unfortunate, but that doesn't mean the West in itself is weak, because we aren't run by a dictatorship. That's the difference. If people can't get that through their head, I don't know. Maybe they argue we got staunch communists by their heart in the United States because basically that's what every war in the United States was fought for, against this. Even though at the very top in the political system and the elite inner circle in the United States, communism is being pushed as one arm towards globalism, and they do not actually have super tight control over everything like they think they do. Their real problem is when they got somebody like Putin comes into being, he's for globalism. He's for the expansion of power. But he wants it on his terms. Don't trust that freaking game, because anybody that's an American that has to get behind one leader to solve all their problems is not an American. That's all there is to it.